we've got Tony Mathis here, of course, the spokesperson for Seth Rogers, and we appreciate you joining us. How are you doing today, Tony?
I'm doing good, Mr. E. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear perfectly. You guys did great with the show with Seth the other day. We were just talking about this earlier. I've never seen a live like that where it was moving so fast, and I think they had it slowed down like the slowest rate as possible. We were modding, and trying to block the trolls and that kind of thing, and it was almost impossible that you couldn't even click on them fast enough. But a huge success. You guys had a great, um, um, you know, a lot of interest. There's still obviously tens of thousands of people that are still following this case, and so supportive of the effort to bring Sebastian back home. And so you all did great. It was a very interesting interview. But I appreciate you joining us today. And I think that if I understand correctly, what you were interested in discussing was maybe helping to clear out up some timeline issues. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate. First off, Mrs. E, how are you?
Correct, sir.
So, what I'd like to talk about, guys, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to come on and clear some of this up. First thing I can tell your audience is that you guys are here tonight with a group of people that verify, re-verify, as Mr. E said over and over again, try to gain information from a couple or three different sources before they put it out. And unfortunately, I'm not going to get into mentioning creators by name, but unfortunately, we're dealing with other creators that they really don't verify anything, and it's kind of a pattern with some of these creators. And the latest thing that's out there from a couple creators is that there had been an email sent by Seth Rogers that he was trying to get Sebastian put in a home. I think it started out, September, October, that kind of thing. Even the dates aren't correct. Uh, I heard another rumor that something to the effect of Seth was told that, well, they had given Seth a year to get his home in order. And because he couldn't get his home in order, they were going to do something different with Sebastian. That's kind of like it's kind of like a lot of the other things that have happened there locally. It's just not factual. Um, I'll take you guys back. First off, we're we're familiar with some of these DCS reports that have been talked about over and over again. Um, I think it's important for your audience to know that over the last 2 years, there's been five different DCS reports that were filed. Those re-
Fi-
those those reports started in 22.
So did you say five, Tony?
Correct.
Okay.
are these all in the Proudfoot home?
Correct.
Okay, yeah,
Now,
I don't think I've ever heard that number before.
so what I can tell you, obviously, we are not allowed to discuss the content of those reports.
Right.
Uh, I can tell you that whether they're in one parent's name or the other step parent's name, the allegations are consistently against the step parent. So you can have a DCS report that's filed that may be in the mom's name, but it may be regarding the environment that she is allowing her child to be in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's go back to the first of these DCS reports was filed in 22. So fast forward to 23, which would have been, let's say, a year ago at this time. Um, Katie and Chris were actually trying to get Seth to take Sebastian a year before everybody knew that the plan was for him to go to live with Seth. So you look at, I want to say October of 22. Now these dates are rough. They're within a month or so of being accurate.
Okay.
But in October of 22, um, they had tried to get Seth to take Sebastian then. Now, this is not something that a lot of people know. Well,
I have not heard this. No.
what they're talking about when they say that things could not get in order for him to get Sebastian, it had nothing to do with his home. It had to do with the fact that they wanted him to take Sebastian in the fall of 22, and he had tried to get signed up for the online program with Clarksville schools, and there was a waiting list, and he could not get approved. So he had a conversation with Chris and Katie and told them that he really thought that it would be smart for them to continue to let him finish out the school year and not move him to another physical school in the middle of the year. So that's what happened. He stayed in his, stayed at the school he was at for the remainder of 22 and part of 23. So fast forward to November of 23, we know that there were more DCS reports filed in that month. And we know that on or about the time those DCS reports were filed, Seth Rogers received a call from Chris and Katie that they wanted to put Sebastian in a behavioral center. Basically, you can call it a boys' home. I don't like to call it that. I like to call it a behavioral center.
Okay.
They were having problems with Sebastian at home. They were having problems with Sebastian at school. They were kind of at their wits' end with him. According to Seth, they did not have a lot of patience with him, which is why they had a lot of problems that Seth did not have when he was with Seth. Uh, so Seth asked Chris and Katie to send him the name of the organization that they were trying to send him to. They sent him the name. The name of that organization was Bledsoe Youth Academy in Gallatin, Tennessee. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that place.
I don't think I've heard of that.
Okay. So that was in November of 23. Seth does research on that specific center. And according to Seth, there had been 5 or 6 childhood deaths associated with that facility.
Oh, wow.
So when he found
Right.
that out, he reached out to Chris and Katie again by phone, let them know that under no circumstances was his son going to that facility, and gave them the reason. So they in turn told Seth that if he could find another behavioral facility that he liked better or that he thought was a safer place for Sebastian, they would allow, they would consider that. So the infamous email that people are talking about was simply a forwarded email. I have a copy of it, and I will send it to you guys off the air.
Oh, that'd be
Uh,
great. Thank you.
he reached out to a a lady that was a behavioral specialist, and she recommended 4 different centers. And the
Okay.
4 centers were, one was in Missouri, one was in Utah, one was in Wyoming, and then the 4th one was in another state. I can't remember what state it was in.
Okay.
So when Seth got that email, the email described in great detail each facility, what they treated, what they specialized in, a little bit about the facility, and it was basically a synopsis of all 4 facilities. So Seth, on December 1st, simply forwarded that email to Chris and Katie. Again, I have a copy of the forwarding email. So they did some research, figured out that those facilities were between $5,000 and $10,000 a month. They decided it wasn't in the cards for the blended family together to be able to pay for that. So that's when they went back to, well, when this school year is over, he's coming to live with you, which would have been in May, which of course Seth said, fantastic.
Right. Okay.
I'm going to go back to Clarksville and I'm going to find out if he is ready to be approved for that online school. Well, in a matter of a week, Seth found out that Sebastian's name had come up, which would have been the second week of December, and that Sebastian had been approved for the online school. Basically, his turn in line had come up, so everything was was situated there. They quit talking about the behavioral centers or what have you, and just accepted the fact that in May he was going to live with his dad, and it would be his dad that would be dealing with him and any issues he may or may not have. So fast forward to the end of January of 24, there was
Okay.
another DCS report that was filed. We do not have the details of that report because that report was ongoing when Sebastian went missing.
So even Seth has never read this one.
Correct.
And Tony, there's a few questions in chat about this. And if I remember correctly, Seth had to go to an attorney to get these reports in the first place, correct?
The report, yes, all of the reports that I mentioned previously that were not currently open, he had to go to an attorney to get those reports.
Can I just clarify? So that one that happened in January that Seth has not been able to read, is that is the 5th CPS report that we know of?
Correct.
Okay. Wow.
That's insane.
Now, I'm a math guy, but I don't think you have to be a mathematician for this to add up. And I'm certainly not going to come on your show and start getting into accusing anybody, but
No.
get to the point where there's enough DCS reports and it's been made very clear that they don't want to deal with this child. And on February 25th, early February 26th, the boy goes missing.
Wow.
That's incredible. Why didn't one of the questions that popped in my mind just going through when you were giving this timeline? So if he was trying to get him registered for the online school in 2022, but wasn't able to get in because of a waiting list. Why didn't he take him at the beginning of the fall of 2023? Was there? Do you know the reason?
Hadn't been approved yet. They approve them all throughout the year.
So there was even a 2-year backlog on trying to get into that online school.
Tony said the first week of December he was approved for the online school, and that would have been in 2023.
I see.
It was about 14 months it took him to get approved.
And just to be clear for people in chat, Tony said that the last report that Seth could not get because it's an ongoing report has not been closed.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's why he cannot get it.
Someone else in chat was asking about a meeting with all parents at the school on February 10th. Do you know anything about that?
Or he might not be able to speak on it.
Guys, just like I had to just like I had to gather all the information for you guys on this, I would have to ask that question and gather that information.
Right.
Gotcha.
No, I mean,
This is kind of shocking.
yeah, I don't even know what to say. Um,
So I'm
so
going
you,
to, just in the spirit of your audience knowing that that all of this is uh, that all of this is fact based, and I've verified all of it. Looked at the emails. Uh, the first of those four places, and you guys can write this down. First of the four recommendations was a place called Masters Ranch Academy. That's the Missouri one.
Okay, hold on.
okay.
Masters Ranch. Okay.
New Hope Christian Academy was in Texas. Oasis Boys Ranch is in Wyoming. And the one that you guys are probably familiar that there's been conversation about was the fourth one, which is Stillwater Academy in Utah. And that's where a lot of the Tennessee boys go that have these types of issues.
Okay. I'm making notes. Sorry, Tony.
And
No, that's just
at the bottom of the email, the lady said all of these locations have openings. And this email was from Tara Akers, who was the assistant director, information services for residential schools and programs.
wow. That is really eye opening. Uh
But I would tell your audience that if you are going to pick creators to listen to, before you take something and run with it, look at their track record. And you've got some of these creators that have got things wrong over and over and over again. And it doesn't fit their narrative that it was Chris and Katie that wanted him in a behavioral center. Seth did not control that decision because he was not the majority custodial parent. They were
right.
nice enough to give him some input, but he also wanted a center that would counsel him for some of the things he had been through when he was younger. And I think we all know what I'm alluding to.
Sure. Sure. And should. I mean that's uh wow, that is the chat. We're just kind of looking here what people
Well,
are really heartbroken at this news.
Well,
Is kind of the
and it's my understanding.
consensus.
I want to ask Tony just to clarify this because I'm seeing people say, "Why didn't Seth do anything if he knew he knew about the 5 CPS reports?" But it's my
He did.
understanding he didn't know, right?
He didn't know about any of them.
That's
They
outrageous.
never
That's outrageous.
they never notified him. When he got the DCS reports, he didn't just get the ones from November. He got all of them.
I mean, that.
It was his custody shared custody.
I don't know what they call it in Tennessee. In Oklahoma, it would be joint custody, but it was, it was a weighted joint custody, right? I mean, he only had him every other weekend.
Right.
Gotcha. As long as his rights weren't terminated, he should have had the ability to. I know because I worked in a school system for 27 years, and we had to notify any parent that was still had rights to the child. Anytime we had to call CPS and CPS came out, they once the investigation was started, we were required to do that. So I'm wondering why CPS did not contact the other parent.
Well,
That's
That's strange.
Auntie, I would tell you that from the legal counsel that we have spoke to, they had a very straightforward legal responsibility to notify him. And I would say that you can't do much about this until we figure out what the damages are.
Right.
But I think that this situation is far from over.
Oh, so
Yeah.
they did have a legal responsibility to notify him. That is
They
what.
did.
Oh,
Okay, I had not.
I
ever
would have
looked into
been
that.
surprised had they not been responsible, because I know that's not something you can drop the ball on.
I see. I guess Clutch the Pearls was on while we were on. He just says, "I'm sitting 1,300 people laugh out loud." I was wondering what was going on here. Our numbers just like went through the roof, and I guess he's hopping over here to hear you guys.
Tell Justin I said hello.
I think he can hear
yes,
you.
I'm sure he can hear you. But
Thank you, Justin.
what
We
I might
appreciate you.
do then is just kind of do a brief recap, Tony, if you don't mind, real quick about what you told us, and actually maybe you can correct me in case my notes are off. What Tony is
You
doing.
need my notes?
Yeah, if I need them legible, I'll grab yours. But yeah, so Tony basically came over here tonight to clear up some timeline issues. I guess there had been a rumor out there about Seth, and so he wanted to just give the full information. Talk to Seth today, and back in October of 2022, Seth and the Proudfoots had all had a discussion about having Sebastian enter an online program in Clarksville and living with Seth. There was a waiting list, so he couldn't get on that year. So they finished up that school year. The following summer comes. Once we get into the fall of 2023, he still can't get into that online school in Clarksville. The waiting list is still full. So he enters high school, of course. They start having trouble at school, behavioral issues. And then sometime around November of 2023,
CPS reports or DCS reports.
Oh yeah. So actually, during this time of 2022 through 2024, or January of 2024, there were a total of 5 different CPS reports made, all separate incidents, all mostly involving, it seems, the influence. Sorry,
The 5th one's still open.
the 5th one is still open, but they all are directed, or they all involve the step parent in the home. Is the
Predominantly, right?
Predominantly, although Katie seems to be named possibly in a couple of these, but more as
Allowing.
but the step right, allowing the situation to occur. So they are having trouble with Sebastian, I guess, at some point, and then around November of 2023, they start having discussions about putting Sebastian in a behavioral school, one locally in Gallatin called Bledsoe Youth Academy. Seth does some research on it. It turns out they've had a lot of, I guess, children pass away under their care, and so he didn't want to approve that. He reached out to a lady named Tara, who works with this kind of thing. Found 4 other really good schools around the country. Those cost between $5,000 to $10,000 per month. So of course that's $60,000 to $120,000 a year. So that was not feasible, for the budget at that point, I guess. And then he gets approved, I guess, sometime in that winter, before he went missing, to get into the Clarksville school. So then the plan becomes for Sebastian to go live with Seth in May, which we all knew this part of it, that was the arrangement. But then another CPS report comes in January, and we still don't know what's in that report. And neither does Seth, neither does Tony. No one knows, because it's an open investigation. And then Sebastian goes missing in February. So there's your timeline. Tony, am I misspeaking on any of that you could tell?
No, and when I spoke to Mr. Rogers, he said that the ongoing one was either at the end of January 24 or the very beginning of February, within that few days there.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. So I assume police have seen it, correct? They'd be able to see it. Investigators.
I would venture to say that they know everything that I'm sharing with you.
Sure. And they probably, even the open one, that wouldn't be off limits for them. They'd be able to subpoena that, I would think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, that's it's people are so I know you can't see the chat because you're driving. People are just really devastated and heartbroken. They're angry at CPS. That's essentially that's what everyone's kind of saying. It's jaw dropping.
Yeah, that's the response. for sure.
Unfortunately, we knew some little bits and parts of this, but it does kind of make sense. The timeline starts to make some sense, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a conversation offline with you and Mrs. E regarding the John Benet Ramsey miniseries that my wife and I watched,
Yes.
and there was an older. They called him the Sherlock Holmes of these types of cases. I think his first name was Lute. But, he made a statement when he was talking about the case that so many times people make these cases more difficult than what they are. And I looked at Dana and I said, boy, that one hits home. And,
Mm-hmm.
you start to get to the point where, 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 8.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, this is. I mean, if. This is where they should be looking. I mean, it's the first place they need to be looking is right here. If you're ignoring all of this, then you're not, you're not. It's willful ignorance or you're incompetent, and I can't imagine that it's either. I'm sure they are looking at all of this. You know me. I've got the rare opinion or the minority opinion that that law enforcement, this is not a big corruption cover up issue. I've always believed that they are doing a real investigation. It's just a difficult one, and that it's painstaking and it's piece by piece.
They're being careful.
They're
Well,
being cautious and careful.
and
That's been my belief, and I think they've got to be looking here. I don't know how they're
well,
not.
and Mr. E, that I've always shared that opinion with you.
Right?
Uh,
Yes, you said
Yes, he
that.
has.
And so, what I like to look at a lot of different things and say, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? I like to use a lot of analogies, but if you and Mrs. E had 4 or 5 domestic violence situations at your home, and they came out, and every time they came out, you were the bad guy. You were doing things that you shouldn't be doing. She was claiming that she was scared. You did this, you did that 4 or 5 times over a couple of years. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and Mrs. E is missing. I mean, where would the world be looking?
Sure, of course. You'd have to check me out first. I mean, you would have to expect it. Um, you'd have to clear. You'd have to clear me first. If they didn't, they would not be doing their job. So and it doesn't mean that there's any guilt necessarily with these people, but it definitely needs to be the first place they're looking. And until they can clear that, then they don't really need to spend any time looking anywhere else. There's too many red flags.
And
It's
one
got to be
thing
where
that
they are
you-
looking.
Yeah, one thing that you've never heard me say, now you've heard Seth say it, you've never heard me accuse them directly of being responsible, but
Sure.
you will hear me say over and over again that I believe that you have to follow the evidence.
Right.
And I don't know what all the evidence is, and neither do you guys, neither does your audience. And I do believe that they are working hard to keep things close to the vest. And I believe that they are following the evidence. I truly believe that.
I do too. There's actually there's little signs here and there if you're paying attention to it that they are doing an active investigation, and that it's not just sitting on a shelf collecting dust. I think that's the case. And yeah, I'm sure they have way more information than we have. We probably only have 5% of what's out there available that investigators have got. I guess you guys knew, but we had no idea that there were 5 CPS reports in 2 years. That's outrageous. It's outrageous
Well,
in a lot of
and we
ways,
now
even if they
know.
have nothing to do with Sebastian's disappearance at all. It's outrageous. It's unacceptable.
Well, and we now know, Mr. E, that, you know, thanks to a conversation I had with you guys, because I've had my head out of the YouTube world for a little bit, but you know, Sumner County or the TBI, we now have confirmation that they've reached out to two different content creators for either an interview that they've done with one of the parents or some evidence that they talked about and wanted to find out, hey, can I get a clip of this? Can I find out where you got that? So they are watching what's going on, which is encouraging to me.
Mhm.
And it does give us an indication as to which direction they're leaning, to your point, if you're paying attention.
So I didn't know there were two. I knew about Smiley. I knew they had asked her. I didn't know that there was a second.
You were okay. I thought you were there when I told him.
Oh, maybe I took away. Okay, so there's at least two. Okay, great. Maybe.
And one of them happened yesterday, by the way.
Right.
Oh, very interesting. That is very interesting.
That's
Yeah,
encouraging.
so you're not doing that if you're trying to cover this thing up. You know,
Correct.
you're not doing
Correct.
things like that.
Because the moment you do that, based on the information that you're asking for, you're tipping your hat as to which direction you're leaning.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a good sign. It's a very good sign that justice is coming.
Agreed.
It really is. It's slow. Justice is painfully slow, but you know the way these things go is everybody says corruption, corruption, corruption till the day there's handcuffs, and then it's like then they'll be celebrating the police because there's no warm up to it. You know, there's no they're not going to announce the date that this thing's going to be solved. It's just one day everybody's living their lives, and the next day their home's raided. That's kind of how it goes.
Well, and if we could all put our child in this situation, if we could put ourselves in Seth Rogers' shoes, we're all very familiar with the phrase double jeopardy. And
Of course.
when you start talking about bringing your strongest case and getting it right the first time, as much as it pains me to say this, we really don't want them to hurry.
No, I agree. I agree. I am encouraged that they are still gathering evidence, reaching out to creators for interview clips. It's a great sign that they are doing their due diligence. It's just slower than anybody would like. We're an impatient. Everyone's impatient. We all want justice, and of course, more than anything, if he is, there are ways you could look at this situation and think maybe he's alive. You know, there are some. It is still a possibility. And so they also have to be cautious for those reasons about how they go forward too, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I made another comment, and then I'm going to let you guys get back to your show. I made a comment to you guys earlier today that in the one other case I've been involved in, you know, when you're getting over the target as a PI, as a content creator, as a civilian, because you're going to get that phone call from law enforcement that, hey, you've stumbled upon something here and it's not something we want discussed.
Right.
And in a roundabout way, I believe that these content creators stumbled onto something.
Yeah.
Right. There's got to be something there.
Yeah.
Um,
Because we know how law enforcement feels about content creators. And in order for them to reach out and ask for assistance,
Yeah.
they had
Can't
to
blame them.
they had to have had something that either they wanted kept private or that they wanted to take a better look at.
Right.
So,
Well, I would think I know you're saying you're going to be going soon. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all of that information with us. You know, there's so many people invested in this, and just want to discover what the truth is, even if it's painful, like what we've been hearing tonight. That we can't shy away from it. It's the reality, and It gives us a little more clarity on what was going on leading up to his disappearance, which is very important. It's maybe the most important part. But I really appreciate you coming and doing this. Do you guys know? Have you and Seth talked about the next time you're planning on doing a live? Are you doing one this weekend or waiting a while?
We actually have some things we're going to address, and we will be having a guest on with us, and it will probably be this Friday night.
Great.
Oh, okay.
Great.
Great.
Well,
I guess we'll clear our schedules.
we'll clear the decks. If you would like us to mod again, we'll be happy to do it.
Yeah.
And
Of course.
yeah, and we'll make sure we promote that when you guys pick a time and all that stuff, and let everybody know about it.
We sure appreciate you guys. Auntie, Mrs. E, you guys have a good evening. And chat, appreciate you guys supporting the E family.
Aw.
Thank you,
Thank
Tony.
you,
You're,
Tony.
thank you for everything you're doing for Seth, and thank you for coming and joining us tonight.
We appreciate you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
You
You
too.
too.
Thank you.
Bye.